Welcome to another episode of And Double D, and I'm Dave Evans.
And I'm Debbie Halls Evans.
That's right, you are, aren't you?
Yes.
Anyway, we have got a really exciting guest in this episode. We have exciting guests every time, but it's a man who's got a really cool name, Jamie Jones-Buchanan. I mean, what an absolute quality name to start with.
Also, is Buchanan Scottish?
It must be.
Is
Are you Scottish, Jamie?
It's interesting. I did one of those DNAs recently, and I think about 10% of it was Scottish, yeah. But the Buchanan comes from my dad's side, which is Caribbean, which goes back to in that
Oh my word.
DNA right back to Nigeria. So the name's not Scott. Well, it has at some point in history, probably very ethically become part of the Caribbean, African side of my family, but there is a part of my DNA. Obviously, my mum's white, so north of England, Yorkshire, and Scotland is apparently part of my makeup.
Now, what's really fascinating is, of course, you are a legendary rugby league player, but technically, you could, with that kind of name, have played for Scottish Rugby Union side.
Okay, I've now got lost because I actually don't know the difference between league and union. So I'm going to be real kind of I know I do apologise. I think I might even be swearing at this point.
Well, I think in the modern day, you're probably not. To the hardcore original rugby league fans, that could be offensive, but it's not really.
So shall we let Jamie introduce himself?
Yes, Jamie, tell us about a bit about you and what you've done in your career.
Yeah, well, right now I'm sat in a box at AMT Edingley Stadium, a place that I refer to as a fertile flower bed of opportunity. It's quite abstract way of thinking. I'm a right brain thinker. I always think in pictures and metaphors. Very abstract, very imaginative. And the reason why I refer to this stadium as a flower bed of opportunity is because now that I'm in this current role of Director of Culture, Diversity and Inclusion, I reflect on some of the statistics that say me, as a mixed race working class lad from a little town called Bramley in West Leeds, should never have had the opportunities that I had to fulfill my potential and ultimately live my boyhood dreams. And I did that on the vehicle of sport. Growing up in this parochial little working class town, I found my feet, my identity, my gift, my talents and abilities in hand-eye coordination, in being quick, fast, strong, and a little bit more athletic than the majority of kids that I grew up with. And why I often reflect on that with a fair amount of admiration or gratitude is because I was born on 1st of August. We've just had that chat, which means I was youngest in school year, and the relative age effect says only 13% of young kids who are born in June, July, August play rugby league, and that's because of that relative age effect. But because of providence, because of luck, because of genetics, who knows, I ended up going on this amazing journey. Fulfilled my boyhood dreams, played for my hometown club, the Leeds Rhinos, 421 times with about 144 different players, having only dreamed about that as a young kid. Retired in September 2019, reflecting on a time that I'd played in the club's most successful generation of players, a generation that somewhat reflected on the wall behind me, and now called the golden generation, at a time we referred to as the golden decade. Won 7 grand finals, 3 league leaders shields, 3 World Cup challenges, and I think 2 top of the league leaders. So I always reflect on the fact that I wasn't a great player, and I don't say that to be humble. I was just hardworking and very industrious, but wow, did I play with a very special cohort of individuals who over time, through triumph and disaster, galvanised themselves into an amazing team. So you can imagine my driving passion each morning now is to pay that gift of opportunity forward, using the Leeds Rhinos as a platform, as a voice, as a vehicle to invite people of all ages and abilities from our towns and local city to come and fulfil their potential. And just to wrap that up, when I signed for Leeds, we had one men's team. This is 1997. 2025, we've got a men's team, we've got a women's team, a wheelchair team, a learning disability team, a physical disability team, a netball team, and a running club. So you can imagine the mosaic of people that we get through our doors who are honoured and proud to wear the blue and amber jersey, and through a heart of benevolence and love, we try and portray a wonderful sort of ethos to our city and help other people fulfil their potential.
See, I think it's fabulous because would I be correct in saying that you would have played during the Rob Burrows era as well and Kevin Sinfield?
Yeah, absolutely. So Kevin Sinfield's there, hugging Jamie Peacock just over my right
Yeah,
shoulder. And listen, I think it's really important for me to impress upon you the ethos that I talk about and that underpin that generation. Kevin Sinfield created an environment that invited people to come and be the very best version of themselves. And you look at Rob Burrow, for example, when he was a young kid, and I've known him since, knew him from when he was about 13, 14 years old. And because he was so small, people would say, he's a great little player. Look at how entertaining he is. Nobody can catch him and he ducks and he dives, but he's not big enough. He's not going to make it, unfortunately. But this, what everybody's perceived as a weakness, he turned into a superpower. And as we've seen played over and over again, when Rob sadly passed away and beforehand, when he scored that grand final try in 2011, Rob used what people thought as his weakness as a superpower. And ultimately, it was underpinned by a heck of a lot of courage. And he showed that courage weekly. Sometimes, mate, he'd get knocked into next week. Sometimes he'd score tries like that, but he'd always turn up. He'd always be there. He was committed to his club. He was committed to his teammates. And when he lived and walked that next chapter, living with MND, he did so with an equal, if not more, courage. An equal, because a lot of people live that privately. He decided to do it publicly, and between him and Kev, they shone a light and raised a lot of money for a community that really needed it.
Well, I think it's been an extraordinary moment, but we're going to come straight back to you because we want to talk to you today. But in our Mallorca leadership gathering last summer, we played that video, his last speech, to people from other parts of the world who don't know rugby league, and the impact was profound, wasn't it? Because they saw, for him to have the foresight to prepare an inspirational message after he was gone, I think reflects back directly that spirit you're talking about that was in the team you were part of.
So, Jimmy, can I go on? No, go, please.
I always refer to it when I'm speaking to young kids as the ABC, and this is how I remember it. Altruism, the selfless concern for the well-being of others. Kev always promoted that. It was always about the team first, and he knew the old stoic quote there, a rising tide lifts all the boats. And if we were all good and selfless and bestowing upon each other, then that would be reciprocated on the field in those really difficult times. And that's what forges those relationships, right? The memories. The second part of the B was benevolence. So whatever gift you've got, to quote Pablo Picasso, the meaning of life is to find your gift. The purpose of life is to give it away. And I could go really deep into this. What happens to people who don't find a gift, or those who do and don't decide to give it away, but use it for their own selfish gains. But we fostered an environment where people were willing to give it away. And then the C part of it is about the courage, which we've already talked about. The company that you keep, you become the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. Comfort zone, get out of it. Spend as much time as you can out of it. Our bodies naturally don't want us to go there because it's by definition uncomfortable. But in personal experience, it's the only place I've seen personal growth. So get out of your comfort zone. And Kevin's number one rule begins with a C. Certainly when he's running his marathons is the comedy. It's got to be fun. Because if we're not here to work hard and look after each other and serve each other for some fun at the end of it, what on earth are we doing? So always about the fun, altruism, benevolence, courage, ABCs. That's what we underpinned. Kept it simple and had a lot of success because of it.
So my question, it ties into that, is that knowing Jamie as the young boy from Leeds, coming up, what is it that took you? Because you said you were really clear that you've been very humble about it's not about skill. No, let me talk.
I want to tap. I know, but I want to tap in. There's a piece of history that's important here, right? So I want to just check in with Jamie. Does Jamie realise when my path first crossed the Rhinos? So because it was when there was a motivational speaker that passed of a heart attack, and he used to do mindset work with the youth. And his partner used to come to the games, and I stepped in because she worked for me on her behalf or his behalf and honoured the youth work at the Rhinos. And I don't think you were in the youth at that point. I think you might have graduated. I don't know what year it was, but it was way back in 2010, maybe something like that, 2009. So this golden generation, I got to influence them, not knowing who would come out of it, as an act of kindness, right? So we should join that up in a minute, shouldn't we? But I wore tweed trousers back then and a tweed jacket, so you might not have recognized me. Didn't have a hat. I had hair, a little bit of hair left. Go on, Debbie, ask the question again.
I think the guy you're talking about was
Pat's
Clive
crossed.
Gott. Was Clive Gott, yeah. So
Correct.
he was what he would call an inspirational speaker. He didn't believe in the idea of a motivational speaker because you can't motivate anybody to do anything. You can only help them to find it within themselves, which is inspiration. Yep. But Debbie, yes, I think he was going back to, I assume, what my origin story is and why I was so driven, perhaps.
Because you, as coaches who deal with mindset and literally live and breathe what you've just been talking about, I'm always fascinated by that individual who's evolved into whom you are now.
Yeah.
And what was it about Jamie in his youth to Jamie now? What is it that you did that you now know that you're transferring to other people?
So the transference of information, that's important to me. I've been trying to impress upon people the golden nuggets that I've learned on my journey is that we all need meaning, the purpose piece, and only when you've got real purpose, which I would say lies directly correlated with whatever gift you've got to give. So what are you good at? That gives you meaning and purpose. Then that allows you to find a tribe or a community or a team, whatever you want to call it, your little collection of people that means something to you, your little pack, pride. And then you set out on a destination, you've got a mission and a vision, you want to go somewhere, you want to be identified as something. So you're on the bus, to quote Jim Collins. And then when you're on that destination, you all contribute using your gifts to get you there. And those little wins, those little milestones on the way help you to celebrate and keep motivated, but also helps you to go to bed at night with some level of contentment. And that contentment says, I'm on the right bus, I'm being my authentic self, and that's a bit of a buzzword, I'm being me, the best version of me, I'm trying to be the best version of me. And God willing, we'll get there. There's a couple of other strands to that. My underpinning foundation is in my faith, rooted in my faith. I'm a born-again Christian. So you imagine in my early life, it was always about the wins and medals and success and playing at big stadiums and hopefully maybe earning money, which aren't in themselves bad things, but they were quite idolatrous. And by that, I invested everything into that, but they're not eternal. They're entropic like everything else that's material in the world. So it will fade away, it'll die. There is no infinite part to it. So my faith gives me that infinite element, only through Christ, as I believe in my faith, is their eternal life. Now that's not there for me to bash people over the head with a religious stick. It's what I believe and consume every day. And rather than building treasure upon earth, which as we know perishes, I try my best to build treasure in heaven. And whilst people might go, oh, that's religion, that's not cool, and it's got all these connotations to some grand headmaster in sky pointing a finger, it's just actually about love in the Greek sense, agape, and love being a verb. So love being defined by what you do for other people, right? So people get caught up in thinking it's an emotion. So it's what I feel love. Well, there's plenty of metaphors out there. My favourite is the one that talks about the fruit of the tree. You bite the fruit, it's nice and sweet, and that's an emotional thing. But prior to that, somebody's got to have dug the hole, planted the seed, watered and nourished it over time, which then produces a fruit. That's culture. Then that fruit will perpetually fall off the tree and reseed itself. If you can create and nourish a great culture, then it keeps going perpetually. And by the way, you can't copy and paste cultures because different people in different contexts at different times need different things. But for me, it always rooted in Christ, in God, is love, and then an eternal journey. So there is no finite end. So that means there's an eternal hope. Hope, right? Read Viktor Frankl. and this is in the book, not my words, but in my experience, that which I've read about in human history, when hope disappears, then people disappear with it. No, people die. Words like retirement aren't in Bible, because we've all got a value and something to give until we take our last breath. And that might just be putting a smile on somebody's face, by the way. Don't mean digging holes and building bridges. So the contentment, reverse that. If you think about people in society, social justice, people who are struggling, and I'll give you just one example. Last year, I went into an art exhibition at an old mill, and what was unique about it was all the art on the wall had been painted by previous inmates in prison. So they'd all come out of prison, but they'd all gone to prison not knowing they were good at painting, right? So they learned in prison, and like these paintings are unbelievable, like just full on Van Gogh stuff, right? But when they realise they've got this gift, the reoffending goes down, because they feel like they've got something to give to society. Here's my identity. I never knew what it was, but here it is right now. Now that I've got something to give, I'm painting pictures for people, for inspiration, for decoration, whatever that might be. That gives me some sense of identity and belonging, and it perpetuates. And all you have to do is decide where you want to go with that. So when I'm on this walk, and it's interesting, you talk about the different domains that I'm fortunate to speak in. I can probably speak in nearly any domain, because whenever you go to any event, there's always toilets, there's always food, and there's usually always drink, right? Because that's a fundamental human need. Well, I would say purpose and belonging and some sort of destination is exactly the same for every human being. I just talk about it in a sporting context, but you might speak about it in a leadership context. Others in whatever world that you want to exist in. We're all human at the end of the day.
I think it's magic. And just to link back to something you just said, retain your thought, I feel like you had one, is and Viktor Frankl says, a man who knows their why can overcome any how.
You've caught it better than I can. Amen.
But I always find you. I want to go back to the field for a moment. As someone who watched rugby league and watched you live, right? I'm very lucky. Leeds Rhinos on a match night doing that, and I think it's the same now, but it'll be the same atmosphere, it's the same fans. But it was the oddest of feelings, because Headingley's not a giant stadium compared to giant stadiums in the world. But there's something about that place that when it's rocking, if you're not from there, it's just worth seeing, right? But when you've gone through the 6 tackles, which is something that goes on in rugby league, on the 6th tackle you either kick or you've got to try and attack, and you've got to give the ball to the other team, right? If they kicked it to Leeds and you were on the wing, the feeling that I got watching was, this is good. You were going to catch it. You were going to do something with it, and Leeds would be certain. That's what he represented to me as a player, watching from a fan's view.
Okay, I'm still going to go back to my question. Thanks for that. I really appreciate the 6 things that you just talked about. I want to know
tackles.
I want to know about Jamie and his. You're a complex, delightful being for sure. So. And I've got some schooling questions and not enough time. I want to go back to Jamie in his youth, and you finding this gift of, strength, courage, knowing that you're going to be disciplined and hard work. Where does that Jamie come from? Because you said you're a born again Christian, so you found faith later in life. But what is it? Who was Jamie when he came into rugby? Tell me about him first.
Yeah, so let's talk about my origin story then. So I grew up in Bramley. My mum's 18 when she has me. My dad's a little bit older, perhaps 19. So my dad's surname's Buchanan, my mum's is Jones. That's where I get the double-barreled name. They're both, well, one of them wanted me to be called Peter, one wanted me to be called Daniel. They couldn't decide on that because we were young, so they called me Jamie. Put Daniel Peter in front of the double-barrel name, and I've got the unique full name of Jamie Daniel Peter Jones-Buchanan. My dad left when I was about 18 months. He was a bit of a jack the lad. I still know him really well. He's always been a friend, but he went off to have 11 kids to 5 different women, which is it's like the bloke's Genghis Khan, right? So it's fine until his youngest daughters, who were younger than my 4 boys, who I've had with my wife, all 4 of them. And I met my wife when I was 14. I'm 43. She's my soulmate, my best mate. And I have to say to my 4 boys, will you go in that room and look after your aunties, please? Right? So it's not complex. Human beings are complex, right? But reflecting on that early journey, I had a very maternal upbringing. So my mum and my nana were who brought me up.
Yeah.
They were the sort of philosophical authority in my life. During the time at which Margaret Thatcher was Prime Minister, my nana, not getting political, my nana loved Margaret Thatcher because she symbolised this hard-working, stick your shoulders back, you can be whatever you want type attitude. My nana and my mum, if you did any personality profiling, you'll have done this a million times, where you end up with peacocks or doves or eagles, whatever, extrovert, introvert, and then you try and put a colour next to them, and you get your reds, your blues, your greens, your yellows. My mum, right, and my nana especially, were red raw, just red, mate. Like, even my nana's house, the curtains were red, the carpet was red, she'd paint you red if you stood there long enough. And it was symbolic of this paradigm, this world that I lived in, right, which was just passion, it was love, it was desire, it was pride, and you fought for everything. And I'm getting hairs on the back of my neck because what, as Carl Jung talk about your shadow, it isn't my shadow, but it's the volatile, unorganized part of who I am that can be chaotic. And I love chaos, by the way. Fireworks are my favorite things in the world.
Yeah.
Go back to that. But to answer your question, I had this real passionate, irrational drive as a kid. So when I played sport and I lost, I cried. You know, I'd kick, I'd fight, I'd bite, I'd strive in everything. And if there was a table to finish the top of, it could have been maths, it could have been a dance competition, could have been eating my tea. I was striving to finish top because that was my identity. If I'm good at sport and I'm finishing top, I haven't met too many people that don't want to be around winners. So I wanted to be a winner because when you're the only brown face, and I didn't know this at the time, and you're 9 foot taller than everybody else in a working class environment, you're always striving to survive like the pecking order, right, of a set of chickens. And I saw sport and winning as being the way to do that, which is why it became everything. So the fear then of losing means you're fearing losing your identity and your place within that tribe. And that biologically tells us that's a death sentence, right? A few thousand years ago, you can't be outside a tribe because you die. So we've evolved, any Christians watching a smallie, right, to who we are right now.
Yeah. Because
we're all strivers, and that's what gave me the drive, the influence, the environmental influence of growing up with my mum and my grandma, and this desire to use sport as a vehicle to be top of a pecking order.
Fascinating.
It's marvelous, isn't it? Yeah, it's marvelous.
Joyful story. And I genuinely, being a woman, of course, appreciate the power of strong female characteristics. And again, it can be positive and negative. There's in everything in our life, but how it's influenced you and in your relationship. So, you know, your long-term relationship with your wife, and you've got 4 children.
4 boys, yeah.
4 boys.
My dad had 6 boys before he had a girl, and I'd beat my dad, so I'd be on 7 or 8 if I kept going.
And then knowing this is Jamie as he is, and he's gone into rugby, and now you're doing DEI, which I think is fascinating, particularly in the political scale that we're in right now. And
yeah, globally,
the world feels like at times it's imploding, and sometimes it just feels glorious. It's really polarized. How does Jamie, all of this knowledge that you've acquired, you're definitely a reader because you've highlighted that in regards to, and you seek knowledge. So you are in this constant cycle of evolution. How does that represent itself now? So as a director and DEI and that really difficult place, because it is, I don't think it's actually an easy role for anybody to do. How does that come out?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I think the reason why people get upset and confused sometimes is because EDI can get caught up in ESG, so environmental, social governance, right? And somebody somewhere lumped that together as if it was like an MMR job. Thought we can solve 3 problems in one go here. These are important things they need dealing with. Let's chat about them. They're really complex because they're not always easily measured. Environment's a little bit easier to measure because it's a bit more quantitative. But when it comes to social, it means dealing with people, all right? And there's a lot of complexities around that. And then the governance is the people that oversee all that. But the problem with that is the governance that have come out of the last 20 years, this is all new to everybody. So what they're being asked to do is in their companies that are precious to them, been invited to invite new people in who don't know nothing about their babies, their companies, to talk about how many people they haven't got that they need in that company and why it's good for them. But like most human beings, it's very hard to tell somebody something that they've never seen before. It's that old limiting belief: if I can't see it, I can't be it. Which to me is right for a certain percentage of people. It isn't for visionaries. Visionaries, by definition, are visionaries because they can see things that nobody else can and nobody else has been yet. So why EDI is really important, right? Is not because, and this is where Donald Trump's of the world and others, they think it's a tick box exercise where we need an equal amount of these things because that'll make us all really nice and rosy and feel good. And it isn't that. Though that is beneficial, but the reason why it's beneficial is because you get this mosaic of lived experiences, which helps you to solve modern day problems. So when I go back to my playing career, you're institutionalized and you're caught in this bubble, right, for 22 years. And it reaffirms itself with success. So I'm winning grand final ring after grand final ring, successes after success. So it must be right, it must be valid. But then actually, when you come out of bubble and you go, yeah, it is for my little world, my little context in my team playing rugby league. But I've been on a safari for 2 years, looking at life through the eyes and the lens of other people. So, of course, Stephen Covey, we see the world as we are, not as it is.
Yeah.
But actually, when you start to listen and hear people who've perhaps lived with us, who've got dementia, and they might see a mat on the floor, and to them it's a mat, to them it's a giant black hole that they might fall in. Or people who've got autism and certain noises or lights cause them all kinds of distress. You start to go, do you know what? I'd never even thought of that. And you don't know what you don't know. So then life has got to be, in my opinion, where I'm at right now, about people with those lived experiences feeding into a pot so that I can ask questions like, how do I make a game day experience better? How can I make you feel more welcoming? So I'm going to stand here and talk about helping people to find the gifts if they can't even get into fertile flower bed in the first place. So that's why I'm hungry for knowledge. I'm hungry to hear what somebody's homeless experience has been. Why have they become homeless? Because only through listening can I really understand. First seek to understand, then seek to be understood. And you guys understand what public speaking is all about. There's a guy on YouTube, I forget his name. He's prevalent in that space, and his TED Talk on speaking is got 3 times more views than his TED Talk on listening, and it should be the other way around. So that's why diversity and inclusion is important, because by definition we want to survive, we want to thrive, but we can only thrive and survive if we invite as many diverse people in to help us understand how we do that as a community, because ultimately we're all human beings. We're all human beings.
I have to say that I'd like to throw out for anybody listening. I read an article this morning about meritocracy, and you can't have a meritocracy unless everyone who's involved in that meritocracy has an equal place at the table. And actually what you're talking about is, from your bubble, elite sports performance at its absolute romantic, poetic, and elite best, right? But that existed within a really safe infrastructure. What I don't believe for 1 minute anyone to do with the Rhinos was doing this consciously. They were doing it unconsciously ahead of their time, which is what's given birth and given you the platform to serve and take back and serve the club and honor it. But I think in the world today, you talked about this tick box issue globally. We can't underestimate the power of yesterday. So when we talk about business, countries, all the political debate that is around us, when you stop doing something as major as what you were just talking about, Debbie, DEI, you're dismissing the past. You're dismissing the past in a terrible way, and all the lessons that are still there. But when you keep doing it and you keep inviting the conversation, which is what you were describing, Jamie, then you can only unlock possibility tomorrow. And I think that's fabulous.
I have a theory that's just, we make things so complex that it's really simple. And apologies in advance, but I do have 2 clean mantras for me: is don't be a dickhead and just be a good human, so be kind. And I think if we can get our heads around that.
Which one are you apologizing for?
The swearing
The first one.
The swearing one. But I think there's this element where you know, you talked about hope before, and I think there is this element where we put fear that creates complexity. So therefore we then start creating hierarchies and I'm better than you, you're better than them, etc. And I just think, as you've just highlighted, is just bring people to the conversation, sit and listen and hear other people's perspectives. It's one of the most opening, exciting places to be, is just to listen to other people's stories.
I would like to jump back to your comment, if that's okay. You talked about you being on a 2-year safari. And the question that takes me to is, how did you find retiring and then finding your feet?
Oh, yeah, that's a great question. I'd love to know that.
Yeah, it was brilliant. So for a little while, I went into coaching because that would be the natural progression, right? And when I look back on my career, probably played 2 years too long. The reason why I did that is because I didn't know what the next destination was. I'd fulfilled my boyhood dream. That's all I've ever wanted to do. And I didn't know what other journey my gifts would complement. But then it quickly became apparent, right, that I loved the people more than the game. So I like rugby league, but it's a game. And so I sat at home watching hours and hours and hours of the mechanics of the rules and the structures of the game. Just wasn't interesting to me. Turning up and helping lads play the game better was because I'm helping them develop, right? That's what they need and want. I've got some experience. I can give it to them. So when this role come in diversity and inclusion, I jumped on it. But at the same time, I still had to work out what I wanted to become. And there's an element of me still understanding that, because I think the person I want to become hasn't got any parallels yet, because we'll get there in a second. What I did was, I went on a drawing board. There was a guy called Mike Bates who's rowed an ocean. He rowed from Canaries to Antigua in 2002. And he was fastest transatlantic rower. He broke the record. He's an amazing guy. Yeah, and he used to work for MOD. And he used to talk about destinations and redefining who you are. And men, especially, I met that categorization there just through experience. Men tend to retire not quite sure where they're going to be and have this sort of midlife episode. They start running marathons or have mental health issues, or certainly I've done in my environment. So it was a really important question. And what I wrote down is this word become. Who do I want to become? And the first thing I thought I need to be is me. And interestingly, the word become has be on the start of it and me on the end. So I can't be Kevin Sinfield, as good as he is, because that's not me. It's a bit best version of me. I've got to be me. And Dr. Zeus says it really well to kids. Today you are you. That's truer than true. There's no one alive that's you than you. And then the C and the O in the middle are sort of the starting two letters of what I've already talked about in terms of company and comfort zone. And then I wanted to understand what my values were, because my values were going to become the compass that sets the direction. So I'm not sure where the destination is, where I'm going, but the direction, keeping me on a straight path, will be directed by my values. So I've got to be me all the time.
Yep.
My values, I've mentioned some of them, all begin with F, and it's faith, family, friendships, fitness and fortitude, physical health and well-being, finance, occupation or vocation, what you're good at and how do you make money, because we've got to be part of an economy. I've got a family and 4 kids to serve, wife and 4 kids. Fun and freedom, in that order, my faith being at the bottom. And I keep reminding myself that these are my values, and whatever destination I go in, that's the boxes that I've got to keep ticking and not deviate from that. And it's interesting, the guy, I think it's Seth Godin, talks about the compass and how it's dictated these days. Strategy, not by really forensic detailed plan down to nth degree. It's just by understanding who you are, who you want to be. And we can find that out. People are probably sat there listening going, well, I'm not sure I'm good at that. I think a big clue always comes in the people that you admire. So when you see people you admire, what is it about them that you admire? If you could be somebody else, which is contrary to what I've just said, because you don't want to be them, but who would shine right now as a person that you'd like to be like. My faith, Jesus, is pinnacle for me, hence faith being foundation, because he's loving, benevolent, altruistic, sacrificial, bloody tough, and hardworking. But people in society can point to us what values we appreciate, and they'll give you clues to what person you want to be.
I think that's really fascinating because I mean, literally, you are talking to people that do this for a living, and we genuinely enjoy. I love the fact I'm a proper wordsmith, so the be, come, and me. Can't believe I've not actually done that one. Can we do little cards? And I'm going to steal that one if that's all right, Jim, because it's an absolute cracker.
But actually, you could draw the C and the O is could actually be a compass.
Thanks very much, Dave. Dave doesn't get involved in the creative elements, Jamie.
There you go. So that proves the point. Without that diversity, I've never seen that. So we've just had a freeway. Just had a free racing. Can I share one more really model with you? That comes into my mind. It's crazy because Kevin Sinfield, right, is a complete opposite of me, and we'd say we're best mates. Best man at my wedding, best man at our best man at his. And he represents complete order, the most methodical process, orderly human being I've ever met, right? One end of the spectrum. I always think about it the way that children draw stars. So a bit like the Star of David, it's like that. And that star, the triangle will be on its base, and that's a stable triangle because it's on its base, right? It's got a flat bottom. And that represents order. What time you go to bed, what food you put in your mouth, the things that you can measure. That, the inverted triangle that goes on top of it, is the chaos. And that's what I am by definition. I'm right-brained, I'm creative, I'm abstract, metaphysical, I see the world in pictures, and I'll just love chaos, right? Which means methodical. But when you put the two together, you get this symbiosis, right? This augmentation. Within order and chaos, it brings evolution and creativity. Yeah. Now, because that's on its top, it's always unstable. And without the order, it'd fall over, and I'd just crash and burn, and I'd end up in some kind of poverty, not necessarily financial. I believe I'd end up struggling. But when I'm sat on top of order, then that's where evolution comes from and growth. You've got to have the both. And again, this is another example of why we've got diversity.
Yeah, I love it. Do you know, I've never ever considered drawing a triangle from a solid base first. And on reflection, how easy is that? Now you know it.
Oh, so
which is what I've always done it freestyle and I mess up a star every single time. Whereas now I think I can draw a star perfectly just by your analogy. But it's like you said earlier, when you know, but if you don't know,
you don't know.
I want to go back to your values because I think it's something that, because we coach this a lot, and a lot of people will say, you know, because we work with a lot of business people, is they quote their business values first because it's much easier, right? They've been told that, so that's what they pick up on. I think one of the things that I'm fascinated by yours is, one, your ability to be so fluid. I've never actually heard anybody articulate their values so fluidly without stalling or anything, which is wonderful. But I also, and I'd like to see what your thoughts on this, we coach values around your core values are something you make decisions from. And I think people don't talk about values like that. They talk about values as these much bigger, holistic things. But the reality is that my core values allow me to make decisions that allow me to be me and become me. Do you see it like that? Or is there a different version or interpretation that you have of using your values in your life?
So again, the quote, strategy is a philosophy of becoming. That's the actual end quote of Seth Godin. And I'm a big believer that consistency is really important for people to understand who you are. That doesn't mean, however, that you're not going to adapt and evolve and change with the times and with environments over time. But to answer your question, I think there's a couple of things. I believe a lot of it's biological because when I retired from playing, I got a bit sloppy in terms of, well, I don't play anymore, I'm not performing, so I can eat what I want and go to bed when I want. As long as I can perform my next role, my job, I'm all right. But then COVID happened and a few things happened on the field that I was coaching, and I wanted to set an example. And I seen a friend who'd become really ripped, right? And I thought, that's what I need to do here. I need to challenge myself. and I lost 2 stone in body fat, and I went right down to 6.5%. And then this formed completely new habits and routines in me. So you might have seen the book Atomic Habits. Sort of fell in love with the process behind that. Bearing in mind, I'm not by nature a methodical person. So I'd spent 20 years, right, wearing kit that I'd been given by my club. I'd not chose it, didn't necessarily like it, but it was the brand. And like most people, I looked at it and thought, there's maybe £2,000 worth of kit there. So there's a quantifiable value to it, but I actually don't want it. It doesn't really make me happy. What's my favourite piece of kit? It's that Adidas pair of shorts, Adidas pair of socks, that top, and a bit like the Zuckerberg or the Steve Jobs when they end up on stage wearing the same stuff. I just found my favourite things of every item and bought 2 or 3 versions of it. So then you get rid of that anxiety of what am I going to wear, right? And I know that's in other people's philosophies. I think your brain is 2% of your body weight, uses 20% of energy. So anything we can make routine is advantageous. That made it routine, which then enabled me to get out of bed at 5:15. And I had to do that because I had to be at work for maybe 7:30 to coach. And I started running, and I ended up running every day. And it's a little bit like the Forrest Gump metaphor. You get to this point in your life, you're not quite sure where you are. You sat on porch just daydreaming, and then you put your trainers on and start running. Plus, my mate had started running for MND. And I had this complete shift. My body fat percentage went down. My diet, my palate completely changed in that foods that I'd never dreamed of eating before were the yummiest foods ever. And my favourite colour went from red to blue. And then I had this completely different lens. It is a bit biblically when Saul turns to Paul or Jacob turns to Israel. I had this this transformation and seeing the world completely different. And then I grabbed hold of it, and whilst the old me was still in there, and I can reach into it and just go bananas if need be, I think getting up every morning and running somewhat attenuated that and helped me to be this blue version of me from a psychological profiling. And then that in itself brought about the order that I suppose I missed from being around Kevin Sinfield. So I became the star myself, I suppose, evolved. And then that's where the ability to see these values came from, because I've not been a scaffolding structured person. But if you tell me what to eat and what to drink and what regime to follow, I reckon I've got the discipline and the storytelling abilities in my own mind to get myself through it. And by storytelling abilities, we all know we have to sometimes deceive ourselves to overcome a challenge. We've got to create hope in our own minds, because if we can't believe in something, the end game, we will get there. If we can keep going around the corner, then to quote you, Viktor Frankl, you'll just smoke your last cigarette and perish. So I've always had a storytelling mind, an abstract. I love stories. And it all just seemed to come together. And I read that bit, I don't know if it's true, a couple of things medically. You know, read about Einstein. I think they took his brain they dissected it when he died. And I think they found the profound thing that they found were the synapses that joined the 2 hemispheres were really thick, thicker than most people's. And that's probably why I had a lot of thought experiments. He could see things, and then he used the seeing to correlate with his maths, and then work the experiments out in his mind without actually doing it. And I guess that's where the framework and then the abstract thinking with me cross-pollinates and helps me to sort of articulate it. And then the last bit is my fascination, and this is when I see you, Dave, like amazing, by the way, is the conveyance of information. So people who are good at articulating and conveying information, because this is really difficult. It's not about saying things, because we all speak in English, but when you say something or try and communicate something to people, it also depends on the ears that you're speaking into as to how it's taken and perceived. And a lot of that comes from their lived experience, right, for want of a better phrase. So the first thing you've got to do before you open your mouth is say, who are you? And let them speak. You've got to let them speak, because you don't know whether the information you need to give them is a £1 coin, a 50p coin, a 20p coin, but only through listening to them can you kind of guess. And so, yeah, just all this thinking for me, it's leadership, communication, and the physical well-being and the changes that I suppose have brought me to who I am now. Still working it out though.
I've loved it. This has been a tremendous conversation. We are going to have to do a part 2.
I think there's like a part 20 in
Part
this.
20
It's
and part
just
2.
a joy. to listen to.
May I give you some thought feedback?
Love to, yeah.
You see, I feel like I'd like you to consider a thought in your own style. And it is, I'm saying it as you, right?
Yeah.
I am the aggregate of what I am. Because that's what I hear you portraying to me. You see, when you talked about the structure and absorbing it, you see, the reason why that worked, as I listened to you, is that the aggregate effect of your life to that point, you were ready. And I think the beautiful thing about becoming an aggregate, right? We are what we make consistent, all those things, is that you have so many structural things that are an asset to you. You are becoming the aggregate of what you are. That's what I hear. And I think that's why you're in exactly the right spot today.
Yes. And if I understand you right, the danger, you've heard the saying, a jack of all trades, master of none. A lot of people get that level of anxiety by what they call being spread thin. So quite often I know a lot about a lot of things, but know the detail of nothing. But you've got to trust. I've got to trust. Somebody asked me this question last week, that what seems like a lack of time, the aggregate, as you describe it, is actually what prepares me to be able to deal with that, because you have got a hell of a lot of tools in the box. Now your brain starts to panic because you don't know the detail of some of the rooms and domains that you're in, and that breeds about what people refer to as imposter syndrome. What am I doing in here? But to use your language, the aggregate of the other things that you know is what helps you to steer through it. So actually, again, a bit like EDI, I think it's better to find yourself in multiple domains with several plates spinning than it is to be specialised in that regard. If that's what suits you. If that's what suits you.
Love it. Debbie, is there anything else you'd like to ask Jamie Jones-Buchanan?
Well, I've got a million questions. I just want to from your last statement, because I scribe notes, I'm highly visual like you are too. And I think, to me, I'm a lover of generalism, and I'm a lover of generalists, because to me, they are more open, curious, willing, accepting, and also really willing to evolve and be different. And I always shy away from specialists and experts because there's a lot of dissonance around there, and I actually panic when I'm with those people a little bit. So I just want to say, please embrace your journalism, because it's so empowering and it's really great to hear. The only other thing I would like to say is you quote, and your memory and recall is incredible. I'm just going to capture all my Jamie quotes, and I'm literally going to send them all back to you so that you can repeat your own as well, because I think you've got a lot to offer, Jamie. And I just want to say thank you. Dave said I would thoroughly enjoy this, and I was quite reticent because it was about rugby, but it's not been about rugby.
I don't know.
So I have to say thank you so much, and thank you for allowing me to ask you lots of questions too.
Pleasure. Thank you for the opportunity. Finish with gratitude. Appreciate it.
Always.
So we've been talking to Jamie Jones-Buchanan, played for Leeds Rhinos 421 times. He's now spending his time as the Director of Culture, Diversity and Inclusion at the club. He has emphasized so much today. Words that I have to say back to you, Jamie, such as teamwork, altruism, benevolence and courage are only a few of the buzzwords and deep, meaningful words he's used in this episode. If you're listening to this, think through about how do you find your purpose, meaning, just like food, water, and where you exist in life from earlier in this episode. Remember, think about how much you're listening versus talking. Think about how you create welcoming environments for everybody in your business, in your team, and in your customer base. We talk about the power of faith and how important that is, whatever your faith is, your connection to everything that is the universe, the world, etc. And he's also talked about the power of how he uses his values to help him as a compass. Because if you do one thing from this episode, remember the word become. Spend your time being me and use your compass to get there. This has been Ann Double D. What a conversation. You've been Jamie Jones-Buchanan. I've been Dave Evans, and you've been.
Debbie Hawes, Owen.
This has been And Double D.